I opened my front door that October morning to find my daughter Rebecca standing on my porch with a lawyer and a moving truck idling behind her. My heart stopped. She looked at me with cold eyes I didn't recognize and said, "Dad left this house to me. You forfeited your rights when you abandoned me." The words hit like a slap. Neighbors appeared at their windows, watching the scene unfold. Mrs. Patterson from next door pressed her face against the glass. I felt my knees go weak. "That's not what happened," I whispered, but Rebecca's face remained stone. The lawyer stepped forward with a folder. Behind them, two men started unloading boxes. My peaceful retirement, the life I'd carefully rebuilt after years of pain, was crumbling in front of an audience. Rebecca's voice rose louder, making sure everyone could hear. "You walked out on your own child." The lawyer handed me papers. My hands trembled as I took them. An eviction notice. My own daughter was trying to throw me out of my home. Within 2 hours, my phone started buzzing. Text messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. The whispers had already started spreading through our small town like wildfire. I drove to the grocery store that afternoon, needing milk and bread, trying to pretend everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. When I walked through the automatic doors, conversations stopped. People turned away. Mrs. Chin at the checkout counter, who'd always been friendly, suddenly became very interested in her scanner. I grabbed what I needed and hurried out, feeling eyes burning into my back. That evening, I made the mistake of checking social media. Rebecca had posted a long message calling me the woman who walked out on her own child. Hundreds of people had already shared it. Comments poured in, strangers calling me heartless, selfish, a monster. I sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot, shaking. Then something inside me shifted. "Enough," I muttered to myself. "You want truth? You'll get it." I went straight to my bedroom and pulled down the old chest from the top of my closet. Dust covered the lid. I hadn't opened it in 15 years. Inside were letters, photographs, legal papers, all the pieces of a past I'd tried to forget. My fingers trembled as I sorted through them. There was a photo of Rebecca as a little girl, maybe 5 years old, being held by Eleanor, my ex-mother-in-law. I'd been standing right next to them when the photo was taken, but someone had carefully cropped me out. Only my hand remained visible on Rebecca's shoulder, like a ghost. I found birthday cards I'd sent that were returned unopened. Letters I'd written explaining why I'd left, begging to see my daughter. All marked "Return to Sender" in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. Then, at the bottom of the chest, I found a sealed envelope. The handwriting on the front was Thomas's, my late ex-husband. It was dated 1 month before his death, 3 years ago. My hands shook as I held it. I tore open the envelope carefully, afraid it might crumble. Inside was a letter written in Thomas's shaky handwriting. The first line made my breath catch. "Helen, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to fix what my mother broke." I sank onto my bed, reading through tears. Thomas wrote about how Eleanor had poisoned Rebecca against me from the moment I left. How she told Rebecca I'd run off with another man, that I'd called Rebecca a burden, that I'd never wanted children. None of it was true. Thomas wrote that he'd finally stood up to his mother in his last months, tried to tell Rebecca the truth, but she wouldn't listen. The lies had been told for so long they'd become Rebecca's reality. The letter ended with words that broke me. "I'm sorry I let them erase you. You deserved better. I've changed my will to make things right, but Eleanor is fighting me. If you're reading this, please use it to prove who you are." I clutched the letter to my chest. This could destroy Rebecca's entire claim, if only I could prove it was real. The next morning, I called a family attorney, Mr. Harrison, whom my friend from the hospital had recommended years ago. His office smelled like old books and coffee. I spread Thomas's letter across his mahogany desk with shaking hands. Mr. Harrison read it carefully, his expression growing darker with each line. "Mrs. Murray," he said slowly, "this letter could be powerful evidence. But if your daughter's lawyer has documents from Eleanor, documents that contradict this, we're facing a serious battle." He pulled out a file. "I've already received a copy of the will Rebecca's team is using. Take a look at this signature." He pointed to a document. There, at the bottom, was my signature. Except I'd never signed it. The handwriting was close, but the loops were wrong, the pressure too light. "That's not my signature," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Mr. Harrison nodded grimly. "I suspected as much. Your daughter is claiming you signed away your rights to the property in a settlement agreement from 1995. But if you never signed it, we're looking at forgery." Mr. Harrison sent me to find the notary who'd handled Thomas's will, a man named Frederick Walsh. His small office sat above a hardware store downtown. Mr. Walsh was in his 70s now, with kind eyes behind thick glasses. When I explained why I'd come, he sat back heavily in his chair. "I remember your husband," he said quietly. "Good man. Very sick toward the end." I showed him the forged signature. His face paled. "Mrs. Murray, I need to tell you something. After your husband died, Eleanor came to see me. She said she was helping organize his affairs, tying up loose ends." His hands trembled as he reached for an old logbook on his shelf. "She asked me about the will, asked if there were any copies. I told her I kept records of everything." He opened the logbook to a page dated 3 months after Thomas's death. There were 2 signatures, Eleanor's bold script, and beneath it, a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. "She forged this in my office," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I needed someone who could verify my story, someone Rebecca might actually believe. I called my old friend from the hospital, Martha. We'd lost touch after I left Thomas, but she'd been there the night everything fell apart. Martha agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. She hugged me tight when she arrived, and I nearly broke down. "I remember everything, Helen," she said firmly. "I saw those bruises on your arms. I saw how scared you were." 2 days later, Martha ran into Rebecca by chance at a diner. I wasn't there, but Martha told me what happened. She'd approached Rebecca, tried to explain that I hadn't abandoned her, that I'd been driven away. Rebecca's face had twisted with rage. "You're just another one of her flying monkeys," Rebecca had spat. Then she'd slapped Martha across the face, hard enough that Martha stumbled backward. The whole diner had gone silent. But here's the thing about small towns, they have security cameras everywhere. The diner owner, horrified by what he'd witnessed, copied the footage and gave it to Martha. Rebecca's mask had finally slipped in public. Mr. Harrison filed a temporary injunction to halt Rebecca's property claim while we gathered evidence. The hearing was set for 3 days later in county court. I dressed carefully that morning, wearing my navy blue suit, trying to look stronger than I felt. The courtroom was small and cold. Rebecca sat on the opposite side with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. She wouldn't look at me. When the judge entered, we all stood. Judge Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back tight. She reviewed our filings, her expression unreadable. Then Rebecca's lawyer stood and made her case, painting me as an opportunistic woman trying to steal from her own daughter. When it was our turn, Mr. Harrison presented Thomas's letter and Mr. Walsh's testimony about the forged signature. Rebecca exploded. She jumped to her feet, shouting that I was manipulating everyone, that I'd manipulated her father before he died. The judge banged her gavel. "Sit down, Ms. Murray, or I'll hold you in contempt." The room fell silent. Judge Morrison looked between us, clearly disturbed. "I'm ordering both sides to produce all original documentation within 30 days. If your daughter's claim is valid, Mrs. Murray, you'll lose your house by month's end." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Eleanor's letters, the cruel words she'd written to me over the years. I'd saved them, hidden them away because some part of me knew I might need proof one day. At 2 a.m., I climbed into my attic with a flashlight. The space was cramped and dusty, filled with boxes I hadn't touched in years. I searched behind the insulation near the far wall, where I'd hidden my most painful memories. Finally, my fingers touched cardboard. I pulled out an old shoebox, its lid held on with brittle rubber bands. Inside were Eleanor's letters, dozens of them, each one more vicious than the last. "If you want to leave, then leave," one read. "Rebecca will believe what I tell her. She's my granddaughter, not yours anymore." Another said, "Thomas is too weak to stop me. I'll make sure that child never speaks your name again." The letters were unsigned, but Eleanor's handwriting was unmistakable, all sharp angles and heavy pressure. This was proof of her manipulation, proof that she deliberately destroyed my relationship with my daughter. I took the letters to a handwriting expert, Dr. Patricia Winters, whose office was 2 towns over. She was a specialist who'd testified in forgery cases for 30 years. Dr. Winters examined each letter carefully under a magnified lamp, comparing them to known samples of Eleanor's handwriting. After 2 hours, she looked up at me. "These were absolutely written by Eleanor Murray," she said definitively. "The pressure patterns, the letter formations, the spacing, they all match perfectly. And Mrs. Murray, these letters directly contradict the narrative your daughter has been telling. This is evidence of deliberate parental alienation." Relief flooded through me. Dr. Winters agreed to write a formal report and testify if needed. But that night, as I was making dinner, my phone rang. It was Dr. Winters, and her voice was shaking. "Mrs. Murray, someone broke into my office this afternoon. They destroyed my equipment and took several files." My blood ran cold. "The letters?" I asked. "Gone," she whispered. "Everything related to your case is gone." I drove to Dr. Winters's office immediately. Police cars filled the parking lot, their lights flashing blue and red in the darkness. The office door hung open, splintered where someone had forced it. Inside was chaos, filing cabinets pulled open, papers scattered everywhere, computer monitors smashed. Dr. Winters sat in her chair, still shaking. "They knew exactly what they wanted," she told the police officer. "They ignored everything else and went straight for my active case files." My stomach twisted. This was Rebecca. It had to be. The next morning, Mrs. Patterson called me. "Helen, I don't want to get involved, but I think you should know something. My security camera caught a car on our street last night around the time of that break-in. It looked like your daughter's silver sedan. I asked her to send me the footage. Sure enough, there was Rebecca's car, driving slowly past my house toward the highway that led to Dr. Winters's office. When I showed it to the police, they said they couldn't prove Rebecca had committed the crime based solely on her car being in the area. But I didn't need them to prove it. I had something better, backup copies of everything. I'd learned my lesson years ago about keeping only one copy of important documents. Before giving Dr. Winters the original letters, I'd photographed every single one and stored them in 3 different places: a safety deposit box, my lawyer's office, and a cloud storage account. Rebecca didn't know that. So instead of confronting her about the break-in, I stayed completely silent. I went about my days normally, grocery shopping, tending my garden, attending church. But I also started documenting everything. Every time Rebecca came by to harass me, I recorded it on my phone. Every nasty text message, every social media post, every lie she told, I saved and timestamped. Mr. Harrison called it building a pattern of behavior. I called it watching my daughter dig her own grave. Then, 2 weeks after the break-in, Rebecca made a mistake. She came to my house late at night, banging on my door. My phone was recording in my pocket. "You should have just stayed gone like Grandma wanted," she screamed through the door. "She spent years making sure I knew what you really were." There it was. Proof that Rebecca knew about Eleanor's manipulation, proof that she'd been part of it. Mr. Harrison suggested we track down Eleanor's friends, people who might know what really happened all those years ago. Most of Eleanor's social circle had died or moved away, but he found one name, Doris Fletcher, now living in Sunnybrook Nursing Home. I drove out to see her on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Doris was 92, her mind still sharp but her body frail. She sat in a wheelchair by a window overlooking a garden. When I introduced myself, her eyes filled with tears. "Helen Murray," she whispered. "Oh, my dear. I've carried such guilt about you." She told me everything. How Eleanor had convinced Thomas to rewrite his will when he was sick and weak, during those final months when the cancer had spread to his brain. Eleanor said she'd handle all the paperwork, Doris explained, her wrinkled hands shaking. But Thomas never actually signed what Eleanor claimed he signed. I saw her forge his signature one afternoon when she thought I was napping. My heart pounded. "Why didn't you say anything?" Doris's face crumpled. "I was afraid of her. Eleanor was a force of nature. But I kept something she asked me to burn." She wheeled herself to her dresser and pulled out an envelope from the bottom drawer. The real copy of Thomas's final will. The one he actually signed. Inside the envelope was a will dated 2 weeks before Thomas died, signed and notarized properly. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining things. "I, Thomas Murray, being of sound mind, leave my house and all assets to my former wife, Helen Murray, in recognition of the wrongs done to her and in hopes she can forgive what my mother and I allowed to happen." My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the paper. This was it. This was proof that Thomas had tried to make things right, that Eleanor had stolen it and created a fake will to give everything to Rebecca instead. Mr. Harrison nearly jumped out of his chair when I brought it to him the next morning. He immediately verified the notary's signature and stamp. Everything was legitimate. "This changes everything," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "With this, we can prove Eleanor committed fraud, forgery, and theft. Your daughter's entire case falls apart." We prepared to submit it to the court. Judge Morrison had set a final hearing for the following week. Rebecca had no idea what was coming. But Rebecca wasn't done fighting. That Sunday, I was sitting in church when the doors burst open. Rebecca stormed down the aisle, her face twisted with rage, interrupting the service. "She forged a will!" Rebecca screamed, pointing at me. "My mother forged a new will and she's trying to steal what my father left me." The congregation gasped. Pastor Williams stood up, trying to calm the situation, but Rebecca wouldn't stop. She rushed toward me, still shouting. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I'd been silent for too long. "This isn't new," I said clearly, so everyone could hear. "This is what your father actually wrote." I pulled out a copy of the real will and held it up. "Your grandmother forged documents to cut me out. She lied to you for your entire life." The church fell completely silent. Then a woman in the back stood up. I recognized her, Sylvia Walsh, the notary's daughter. "My father kept a copy of every will he signed," she called out. I have the records. I can prove which signature is real. Sylvia met me at Mr. Harrison's office the next day with her father's carefully organized files. Mr. Walsh had documented everything: dates, times, signatures, witnesses. He'd even made photocopies of every important document, filing them chronologically. There it was, a certified copy of Thomas's final will with signatures that matched the original Doris had given me. The timestamps matched, the notary seal was identical, everything aligned perfectly. Mr. Harrison submitted everything to the court immediately. But Rebecca's lawyer, desperate now, demanded forensic verification of the documents. She claimed we might have forged the notary records. It was a delay tactic, a way to buy more time, and Judge Morrison had to agree. The final hearing was pushed back another month. That month felt like a year. Rebecca's attacks intensified. She started following me around town, showing up wherever I went, making scenes in public. She wanted to break me, to make me give up. But I'd come too far to quit now. I kept gathering evidence, kept documenting every interaction, kept building an unshakable case. Then Rebecca changed tactics. She started leaking private letters to the local newspaper, selective pieces she'd found in Eleanor's belongings after her death. Letters I'd supposedly written to Thomas begging to come back, promising to be a better wife, admitting I'd made terrible mistakes. Except I'd never written them. Eleanor had forged those too, probably as insurance, a way to control the narrative if anyone ever questioned her version of events. But the newspaper didn't know that. They published excerpts, painting me as manipulative and unstable. My reputation, which had just started to recover, crashed again. People whispered when I walked by. Someone spray-painted liar on my garage door. I came home one afternoon to find my mailbox knocked over and stuffed with hate mail. I sat in my kitchen that night, reading the cruel letters, and I smiled. Rebecca had just made a crucial mistake. Every one of those forged letters she'd leaked could now be proven fake in court. Mr. Harrison filed a defamation lawsuit the next morning, not because we wanted money, but because it would force Rebecca to produce every document she had through legal discovery. Discovery in a lawsuit means both sides have to share all their evidence, all their communications, everything. Rebecca's lawyer tried to fight it, but Judge Morrison ordered full disclosure. Within 2 weeks, we had access to Rebecca's emails, text messages, bank records, and every document she planned to use against me. That's when Mr. Harrison found it, a large transfer from Eleanor's estate to Rebecca's account, $75,000, dated 1 week before Thomas's death. The memo line read, "For handling mother's final arrangements." But Eleanor had lived for another 3 years after Thomas died. The money wasn't for funeral expenses. It was payment. Rebecca had known about the forged will all along. She'd helped Eleanor create it, had been complicit in the fraud from the very beginning. She wasn't a manipulated daughter believing her grandmother's lies. She was an active participant who'd spent years plotting to steal everything from me. When Mr. Harrison showed me the bank records, something inside me finally broke free. All the guilt I'd carried, wondering if I could have done something different, if I could have fought harder for my daughter, it all vanished. Rebecca had made her choice long ago. Mr. Harrison wanted to bring criminal charges immediately, but I stopped him. "Let her keep going," I said. "Let her keep digging." He looked at me like I was crazy, but I knew what I was doing. Every lie Rebecca told now was another piece of evidence. Every forged document she produced, every false statement she made, it all built toward her inevitable collapse. She'd gotten away with this for so long, she'd grown careless. She thought she was untouchable. I wanted her to feel safe right up until the moment everything fell apart. So we didn't reveal what we'd found. We let Rebecca prepare for the hearing, let her build her case on a foundation of lies, let her believe she was going to win. Meanwhile, we organized everything: the real will, the forged documents, the bank transfers, Doris's testimony, Mr. Walsh's records, the security footage, the recorded conversations. We built a timeline that told the complete story of Eleanor and Rebecca's decade-long conspiracy. When we walked into that courtroom, we'd have everything. And Rebecca would have nothing but lies. 3 nights before the final hearing, someone knocked on my door at 11 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw Rebecca standing there alone, no lawyer, no moving truck, just my daughter looking small and tired. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Rebecca's eyes were red from crying. "I just wanted to know why you left me," she said, her voice breaking. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the child I'd loved more than anything. "I didn't leave you, Rebecca," I said, my own voice cracking. "I left them. Your grandmother was destroying me, and your father wouldn't stand up to her. I left to survive, and I've regretted it every single day since." Something flickered across Rebecca's face, something that might have been doubt or recognition. Then, just as quickly, it vanished. Her tears stopped like someone had flipped a switch. She straightened up, and her expression turned cold again. "Doesn't matter," she said flatly. "You'll lose everything anyway." Then she turned and walked back to her car, leaving me standing in the doorway, understanding finally that the daughter I'd known was gone. Eleanor had won that battle years ago. The courtroom was packed for the final hearing. Word had spread through town about our case, and it seemed like everyone wanted to watch the drama unfold. Rebecca sat with her lawyer, confident and composed. She had no idea what was coming. Judge Morrison entered, and we all stood. Mr. Harrison presented our case methodically, like building a house brick by brick. First, the real will from Doris, authenticated by 3 different experts. Then Mr. Walsh's notary records with the matching signatures and dates. Then the forged documents from Eleanor's papers, with their slightly wrong signatures and suspicious timing. Rebecca's lawyer tried to object, tried to claim the documents were fabricated, but Mr. Harrison had documentation for everything: chain of custody reports, expert testimony, witness statements. Then came the security footage of Rebecca's car near Dr. Winters's office the night of the break-in. The recorded conversation where Rebecca admitted Eleanor had manipulated me. The bank records showing the suspicious $75,000 transfer. Each piece of evidence hit like a hammer blow. I watched Rebecca's face grow paler with each revelation. Finally, Judge Morrison held up her hand. "Before I make my ruling, I want to see one more thing: the bank records for the payment made to Thomas's lawyer." Mr. Harrison had saved the best for last. He pulled out bank records from Eleanor's account, going back to the week before Thomas died. There, highlighted in yellow, was a payment, $5,000 made to a man named Howard Briggs with the memo document preparation. We'd tracked down Howard Briggs. He was a disbarred lawyer who'd served time for forgery in 2003. Mr. Harrison had his testimony on video, recorded in the prison where he was currently serving a sentence for fraud. In the video, Briggs admitted everything. Eleanor had paid him to create fake legal documents, to forge my signature on a property settlement I'd never signed, to backdate everything to make it look legitimate. And Rebecca had been there during one of the meetings. She'd known exactly what her grandmother was doing. Judge Morrison's face went from stern to absolutely furious. She turned to Rebecca. "Ms. Murray, did you authorize the use of fraudulent documents in this case?" Rebecca covered her face with her hands. Her lawyer tried to speak, but Judge Morrison cut her off. "I asked your client a direct question." The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Finally, Rebecca whispered, "I just wanted what was mine." Judge Morrison's voice could have cut steel. "Based on the evidence presented, I find that Eleanor Murray committed forgery, fraud, and theft." I find that the will presented by the defendant is fraudulent and invalid. I find that the plaintiff, Helen Murray, is the rightful owner of all property left by Thomas Murray. She turned to Rebecca. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to pay all legal fees for both parties, and I'm referring this case to the district attorney for possible criminal charges. Rebecca's lawyer stood up, her face pale. Your Honor, I'd like to withdraw from this case. Judge Morrison nodded curtly. Granted. Rebecca sat frozen as the courtroom erupted in whispers. She'd lost everything, the house, her inheritance, her reputation, possibly her freedom. As people started filing out, she finally looked at me. Her face wasn't angry anymore, just empty. Outside the courthouse, she caught up with me on the steps. I just wanted to hurt you like you hurt me, she whispered. But there was no conviction in her voice anymore, just exhaustion. I know, I said quietly. Then I walked away, feeling lighter than I had in 30 years. The news spread through our small town faster than the original accusations had. Within days, people were stopping me on the street to apologize. Mrs. Patterson brought over a casserole and cried on my doorstep. I should have asked your side of the story, she sobbed. I just believed the gossip. The grocery store clerk who'd avoided me gave me a sincere apology and a discount. Even the people who'd sent hate mail wrote awkward letters explaining they'd been misled. The town council invited me to speak at a community meeting about the danger of believing rumors without evidence. I almost said no, but then I thought about other people who might be suffering from false accusations, people who might not have the resources or evidence to fight back. So I went. I stood at the podium in the community center, with 100 faces looking at me, and I read Thomas's letter aloud. My voice shook, but I got through it. When I finished, the room was silent except for the sound of people crying. Afterward, dozens of people approached to thank me, to share their own stories of being misjudged. For the first time in decades, I felt truly seen. 2 months later, on a cold December morning, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, I saw Rebecca standing there. No lawyer this time, no witnesses, no agenda. Just my daughter, looking lost. I opened the door slowly. We stood there for a long moment, not speaking. Finally, Rebecca said, I've been going to therapy. Trying to understand why I did what I did. I didn't respond, just waited. I realized I spent my whole life hating you for something you didn't do, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. And when I found out the truth, I couldn't admit I'd been wrong. So I doubled down. I destroyed everything because I couldn't face that I'd wasted 30 years on a lie. She looked up at me, her eyes red. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. You didn't abandon me. They stole you from me. I felt tears on my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. You don't have to love me, I said quietly. But now you know the truth. Rebecca nodded, turning to leave. I almost let her go. Then something Thomas wrote in his letter came back to me, don't let Eleanor win, even from the grave. I reached out and touched Rebecca's shoulder. She turned back, surprised. Would you like to come in for coffee? I asked. She stared at me, disbelief written across her face. After everything I did? You're still my daughter, I said simply. And I've lost enough years already. Rebecca broke down then, really broke down, sobbing on my porch like the little girl she used to be. I held her while she cried, and for the first time in 30 years, it felt like I was holding my child again. We went inside together. I made coffee the way I remembered she used to like it, with too much cream and sugar. We sat at my kitchen table, the morning sun streaming through the windows, and we started the long, painful process of trying to rebuild something that had been broken for so long. I didn't know if we'd succeed. I didn't know if Rebecca would keep coming back, or if this was just one moment of clarity before she disappeared again. But sitting there, watching my daughter wrap her hands around a warm mug in my kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades: hope. The house was mine. My name was cleared. The truth was finally out. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom or the property deed. It was in this quiet morning, in this fragile peace, in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for us after all. Eleanor had spent years trying to erase me from my daughter's life. But in the end, the truth had proven stronger than her lies. I looked at Rebecca, really looked at her, and saw traces of the little girl who used to hold my hand. "I missed you," I said softly. "Every single day, I missed you." She met my eyes, tears still streaming down her face. "I missed you too, Mom. I just didn't know it." We sat there as the morning light grew stronger, two broken people trying to find our way back to each other. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more tears, more difficult conversations, more moments when the weight of the past would feel too heavy to bear. But we'd start here, in this kitchen, with coffee and sunlight and the fragile beginning of forgiveness. Justice had been served. The lies had been exposed. The manipulators had lost. And I had won back something far more valuable than any house: the chance to know my daughter again, the opportunity to build something real from the ruins of what Eleanor had destroyed. I was Helen Murray. I was 58 years old. I was a retired nurse, a survivor, a mother. And for the first time in 30 years, I was finally, truly free.